At the end of 2019, we were in a certain rhythm with how we worked and where we worked. Fast forward to the end of 2020, I think it is safe to conclude that the pandemic has caused lasting change to where and how we worked. In other words, change to the way we worked. So what will the future of work look like? Will remote work be adapted more and more? Do we need to reskill or upskill our workforce? What will be the impact of advances in technologies like artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, data analytics, and blockchain, for example? Good morning to everybody, and welcome to today's Business Clinic. This is the first webinar under Asia Inc. Forum's annual Transform 2021 program for Brunei business owners, entrepreneurs, and managers. Our webinar this morning is an Ask Me Anything session on the future of work. And we have an excellent panel today who will leave us better informed on the subject. Let me introduce our panel now. Our first panelist is Mr. Surav Raut. Surav is a subject matter expert on digital innovation, emerging technologies, and strategic capacity building, helping organizations develop sustainable innovation capabilities. He is the digital and data literacy lead of UCB Biopharma, based in Belgium. Our second panelist is Ms. Amy Ramley, a well-known Brunei tech entrepreneur. Amy is the co-founder and director of digital innovation and growth of Tyne Solutions, an award-winning local tech consultancy specializing in bridging gaps in organizations. Our moderator today is Dato' Timothy Ong, founder and chairman of Asia Inc. Forum. This Business Clinic webinar is brought to you by Asia Inc. Forum in principal partnership with Baiduri Bank as our presenting sponsor, with the support of Archipelago Group as logistics partner and CIC Environmental Services as associate partner. These leading companies are committed to entrepreneurship development in Brunei, and their support is highly appreciated. I'd also like to thank, on behalf of Asia Inc. Forum and our partners, every one of the attendees here this morning. There are more than 50 of you who have registered today for this webinar, and there are others catching this on Facebook Live as well. So with that, let's get right into today's topic. Dato' Tim, over to you.
Welcome, everyone. In a way, this conversation this morning is an indication of how things might change. Andrew is in London. Surav is in India. Amy and I are in Brunei. And here we are having a conversation on the future of work. So I propose that we have our guest expert, Surav, outline his views, and then I'll invite Amy to give her views, her response to Surav's views, and then we can have a conversation and we'll take questions. Surav, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dato'. Thank you very much, Andrew. Let me first start by sharing the screen. Yeah, can you see the screen? Is it okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you very much, Dato'. Well, hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Surav Raut, the DigiMinds and Data Minds lead. So that's the digital literacy and data literacy program at UCB Biopharma. That's a global pharma major headquartered in Brussels. And it's a pleasure to speak to you today on something that is really impacting all of us. As Andrew mentioned, the pandemic really forced us to think the way we work, where we worked from, how we worked, etc. And then it's something that is going to be more sustainable as we move into the future. So everything that we see today as an emerging trend in the way we work is going to be something that we'll see more often in the future. There are so many companies out there, so many institutions out there who are laying out more long-term plans to inculcate the new way of working in their workforce. So with that, let's dig deeper into what the future of work really looks like from our perspective. Now, the pandemic, in fact, accelerated the trends in digital transformation. Did we not have digital transformation earlier? We did have. But what digital transformation used to do was to digitize on one hand, to make sure your processes, your whole setup, your organizational setup was geared towards more efficiency and productivity, and that your employees, your colleagues would be able to work in very different ways. We did have cloud before, we did have artificial intelligence before the pandemic, but what really changed the pace of adoption was the whole urgency to switch gears literally overnight. For many companies, it was literally a matter of days, for some a bit weeks, for a few more months, to move to a more sustainable way of working, to move their infrastructure, to upgrade their infrastructure to something that can sustain the new way of working. So the pandemic actually accelerated all those efforts going on. What it typically did was, we always had innovation. Now, the pandemic, what it did was it bridged the gap. We call it the chasm, the technology chasm. Now, the technology chasm is something where you actually move from being a kind of an early, let's say, player in the market on any technology to being a mass adopted player. And there always used to be a gap in between. So if there was any technology that was introduced from a research perspective, by the time it reached the market and mass adoption, there would be a long time. And by then, perhaps the significance would be lost of that technology. With the COVID scenario that we find ourselves in the last couple of months, this chasm really started getting narrower and narrower. For example, cloud. Today, if we are speaking to each other, we are based in very different parts of the world today. We are still talking to each other because of Zoom platform or any other platform that's typically on the cloud that's working. So it's the rate of adoption that has changed over the last couple of months, and that has really led to disruptive innovation. So the time that took from research through trials to initial adoption to full market adoption, that entire life cycle has shortened considerably. And that's what really happened with COVID over the last couple of months. Now let's start with three key questions on the future of work. Where did we work from normally before COVID? What did we work on before, and how did we work? So here, let's start with where did we normally work from. Now today, if I have to do a quick round of a poll around the audience here, where are you working from at the moment, or where are you dialing in from at the moment? Most of you might be working from home, right? And that's something that's happening across the world. Before, did we have to understand that? No. Why? Because you would be working typically in spaces like this, or perhaps a little more fancier office like this. Now what happens? Now, this is me but I'm actually wearing a full trouser out here, by the way. So I'm not really in that attire at the moment, but this is actually the reality. So you clearly see you're at home. You're in your home environment now. You're still working. You're still video conferencing. You're still collaborating with your colleagues. You might be in your garden. You might be in the restaurant if lockdown regulations permit. You might be anywhere in the world. And that's the concept that's coming in, work from anywhere. So it's no longer work from home or work from your garden perhaps, or work from this place or that place. It's actually work from anywhere. You could be on the beach, you could be in the mountains, you could be in your kitchen, you could be in your garden, you could be anywhere, as long as you have internet connectivity, as long as you're able to connect with your colleagues, with your collaborators across the world, you can literally work from anywhere. And that's due largely to the mass adoption of cloud computing, to the mass adoption of these video conferencing platforms that we see, to the mass adoption of the online collaborating tools that we see happening over the last couple of months. How did we work earlier, if we ask? Now, there, what we clearly see is before we would typically have a lot of paperwork to do. So many of us would be going through a lot of paperwork, filling up a lot of forms. Since I originally come from telecoms, I can tell you for many of the field service people who used to be on the field working on telecom towers and all that infrastructure, they would have to feed in a lot of information in the manual paperwork and then send it to the headquarters or to the operational centers. It doesn't work like that anymore. So what we really see is you used to work in silos. So why? Because you won't have too much of collaboration amongst each other. There won't be too much digitization. Many of us would still be using paper formats. Many of us would still be working completely by ourselves, and perhaps only at the end of the day or end of the week, you'll be sharing the results of your work with your colleagues or with your superiors, and then take decisions. There was not much real-time collaboration to start with. And as a result, what would happen is you will not have enough information. You will not have that almost real-time information that you need to take collective decisions to push the ball forward. As a result, low productivity. So you would still be spending hours and hours during a week at work, but the productivity will be very low, primarily because you will work in silos. You will not be working too much with digital tools. You will not be, let's say, collaborating with your colleagues in real time, and you will not have access to information as fast and as accurately as you would like them to be. And as a result, of course, that did have an impact on productivity. Now, thanks to all these online, the virtual collaboration tools that we see, the virtual platforms that we see, the online collaborating media that we see, for example, Google Sheets or Microsoft Teams or Office 365 or Zoom, you really are able to collaborate with your colleagues in real time. So for example, if you're looking at Microsoft Teams, you can have channels and groups, and you can bring in all the people in the team together, and they're actually collaborating in, at the same time with you. So any information that you need from anyone, any file that you would like to share with anyone and work together on that file, it's all possible now in real time. So as a result, you have that flexibility, you have the information, you have the data to really take those decisions on the go. You really don't have to wait for someone to feed you the data anymore. That's what is really changing in how we worked over the last couple of months now. As a result, because of all this collaboration that you see, with all the information that you're able to gather in almost real time, with all this, irrespective of the number of colleagues you have, irrespective of where your colleagues are sitting when you're working with them, you have access to data. And it's a very standard phrase that we use across industries today: data-driven decision making. It's not a catchphrase anymore. It's actually something that is happening today. You really have access to data that you're able to take decisions on. So that's exactly what has helped push the needle of productivity in a very positive direction over the last couple of months. Now, what did we work on? So if I may ask, was it something very exciting? Perhaps yes. Many of us would still say, yeah, we always used to do a lot of manual work. We always used to do a lot of repetitive work. So the same work, for example, if you have to feed in data into an Excel sheet and getting that data from very different sources, and you have to manually feed them, yes, that would be a monotonous work. I don't think you'll have too many motivated employees out there who would like to do that, right? Now, thanks to automation, thanks to AI, you are able to do that. You are able to let's say, batch process your work. You're able to automate a large part of the work that you were doing. What it does it frees you up to do something more concrete, something more valuable for the company. So as a result, your colleagues are also able to kind of work on something that is more productive for the company. And what really facilitates this automation, it's typically AI that is coming at play, because on one hand, it helps you to automate the processes, automate the work that was needed, but also help you take decisions as a result of that automation. So for example, if now we have a lot of information coming in from very different angles, it's a huge, let's say, terabytes of files together that needs to be processed, and you get that information out of all that data. What you really need is something to sniff through that information and give you valuable insights, and that's where AI is coming to play more and more. So what do employees and organizations really need to succeed in this entire, let's say, revamped digitalization, if I can call it that way? On one hand, you need employees who are motivated, who enjoy their work, but also who are in line with what is needed of them in the future in terms of upskilling and reskilling, and how you as an organization can help ensure the sustained growth, the sustained productivity and efficiency that you need out of your organizational setup and employees. Well, first, ensure that you leverage technology. Now, I'll come back to it a little later, what kind of technology are we talking of. So you ensure you leverage new technology. Some of them could be blockchain, AI, Internet of Things, new ways of working, because you need to get more and more close to your customer. You need to get more and more close to the place of action where it's happening, and design thinking and agile principles can help you do that. And you typically have to adapt to the VUCA world. Now, VUCA, so it's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's a world that we're living in today, where the pace of change is so rapid that we have to have the agility, the adaptability to change ourselves very quickly. And some of these concepts can help us mitigate the risks associated with the VUCA world. Let your employees help understand what data literacy and digital literacy are all about. They need to understand what to do with the data. They need to understand how to get information. They need to understand the key emerging technologies or even the existing technologies that we have out there, and figure out how they can be useful to their work, how they can be useful to what they work on, and overall, in a more overarching manner, how is it useful for the company. So it's very important that the employees, that the company really focuses on data literacy and digital literacy if they would really like to have this digital adoption pace that we see now being more sustainable. It's not a one-off project that should be treated. It should be treated as something that is going to be forever. So it's like a going on effort that has to be there. So that sustainability has to be maintained. And finally, what are the key digital skills that I see playing a role in this entire process? Well, data. Hands down, you need to understand what data you have, how you're going to treat the data, where you're going to store it. There's a lot of concern around privacy and security of the data, so that has to be maintained. Analytics, so what do you do with the data? What information do you get out of it? Visualization, which typically means once you've analyzed the data, once you've got the information, how do you relay that information to the audience based on who the audience is? So analytics and visualization will play a key role in the future. Artificial intelligence, we just discussed that. It's a key to ensuring that you're able to make most use of the information that you have and to leverage on the new ways of working that we see. IoT, Internet of Things, with all the sensors, all the devices that are going to be interconnected to each other, you again get a lot of data, a lot of information together that you would really like to capitalize on, that you would like to work on. And that's exactly what the IoT will help you get that. Blockchain. Now, a lot of your systems are going to be prone to vulnerability, prone to cyber attacks. Blockchain can help a lot of to mitigate a lot of that. Why? Because it works like a distributed ledger. So your information is actually being stored in multiple locations in fragmented manner. So blockchain can really help you solidify your security apparatus around the information that you have. 5G, that's typically on the speed factor. So the rate at which you would like to transfer your data from perhaps the devices that you see on the IoT ecosystem to your processing units, That's where 5G can play a very big role. Automation and RPA, we just discussed, it will really help you automate a large part of your work and your workforce. That will be great. Cybersecurity, well, hands down, we all know what WannaCry ransomware or any such Trojan horse ransomware actually did. Every day you will see some effects of cyber attack. It's important that your colleagues understand what cybersecurity best practices are and how to follow them. And finally, extended reality. Now, today, if we are talking on a collaborative environment today, the next step would be you would actually see a hologram of it, or you're actually able to visit your premises in real time, but virtually. So extended reality, so augmented reality, virtual reality, or mixed reality will definitely play a role in the near future. For our company, for example, we are already using a lot of that, and I'm sure there will be a lot of companies doing that. So these are the key digital and data skill sets that I think could be interesting for the workforce to go forward with and to leverage on the new ways of working that we just discussed. And with that, of course, I would like to end my presentation here. This is my contact detail, of course. Anytime if you'd like to have more feedback, if you'd like to ask more questions after this presentation, after this session, I'll be very happy to connect with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Suraf. That was a very useful overview. Amy, what are your thoughts? What are the areas of agreement and areas where you might have a different view?
Thank you, Dato, and thank you, Saurav. That was a really beautifully concise overview of where we're all heading pre and post-COVID. I think I definitely agree with the vast majority of what you said, in fact, on pretty much everything. But I think there needs to be some added color in terms of what COVID has done to impact the opportunities that come with the changes in how we work. So I've been working remotely for almost a decade. It's not unfamiliar territory. I used to say that when travel was permitted, we'd work from anywhere. We worked from a rooftop in Nepal. We worked from a volcano in Indonesia, literally with our laptops sitting at a cafe. And that was the beauty of remote work if you had the privilege and opportunity to do so. And I used to advocate strongly for a long time that remote working, especially future, flexible and remote working that is part and parcel of the future of work, was extremely important for the, I guess, fair distribution of economic access to remote communities, firstly, so you don't have the mass migration necessary to go to get work by going to big cities. You have distribution of resources to more remote communities that way, where all the wages are fairly, well, maybe not fairly, but evenly distributed across the globe. The second biggest benefit was also for those who were unfairly burdened with care work. So women, other people with care work as well, but it was predominantly women, and allowing them to have access to work, to employment, to their own, I guess, sources of income, regardless of where they were, and to have work basically shaped around their lives and not the other way around. However, COVID, despite accelerating a lot of these trends, and now you say remote working and everyone's like, it's very, it's normal now. It's become the norm. Everyone understands what it means. I used to have to explain what it meant, and it's familiar. However, the opportunities have shifted. Because of the lockdown conditions in most countries around the world. Brunei has been very fortunate to not have to go through that situation. Women were, I guess, were demanded more of their time, because now in addition to having to work from home, they were also unfairly depended upon for more unpaid care work, housework, regardless of the fact that their husbands might be at home at the same time or they have other family members. And so that, and also economic restrictions or the recession that is really emerging in a lot of countries are really affecting the type of opportunities that are coming out of this shift in the way we work. So, and on that note, there's also a lot of, I guess, data out there to show that not all companies who have experienced remote work through COVID are happy to keep going with it. I think we have some really high profile examples, like I think was it Twitter who are saying, you don't bother coming back to the office. But I don't know if you've seen lately, a lot of job boards that I've been checking out to do some research for this, you have actually a real caveat on a lot of them. It says temporarily remote. And so as soon as restrictions are over, we expect you to move to this city. We expect you to come into the office. We expect you to be in the office at least 4 days a week. And what's surprising is actually the countries where you expect to have the least resistance to remote working or flexible working actually have the highest. So I'm very familiar with a lot of companies in the UK. My husband's from the UK. And most companies in the UK are extremely resistant to remote working. I think we've spoken to potential clients about how, okay, for them, their teams, they insist, yes, you can work remotely, provided that you're within the M25 and that you can pop in whenever you're asked to pop in, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of being able to work from anywhere. Despite the fact that this trend is really about shifting your workforce from I guess or from a workforce of tasks is really about adding value. And so there's a lot of I guess psychological, cultural obstacles to really full adoption. And so that has tempered this trajectory of adoption. Last but not least, there's also an increase in service jobs where with not only the recession, but even before then, there are more, the highest growth in jobs have been in services and food and beverage and health. And those are very, very difficult, if not impossible, to do fully remote or flexible. And again, as I'm sure you agree, not every job needs to be remote, flexible, or for it to be part of this future of work. And so, but that's just an important note there to really add a bit more color to who are getting these opportunities, and where the opportunities are distributed, and how COVID has really shifted all those trends, even though it's upwards, but it won't be upwards for everybody. There's also, despite all that though, I do completely agree that this isn't something that will go away. You're not going, there are more and more jobs or more and more industries that are open to and really designed around remote and flexible working. And it used to be, when I started out, it was just software. Software is the easiest for you to pack and parcel to different people, and the metrics are very easy to track because it's essentially you're delivering code back. So I don't know if so before the Industrial Revolution, the way people produced goods was really you get all the raw materials from a central source, bring it home, do the work and send it back. Software was really similar to that because you're essentially getting your instructions, going away, doing the work and sending the code back. So it lent itself very easily to this movement. However, now we're seeing education, even health, like all forms of consulting, sales has been a remote profession for a long time, I believe. And so I do believe that despite the impact of COVID on where the opportunities are lying, there's really a trend towards this across a wide range of industries. And so, and again, as you've mentioned, it's really a burden on the employers to ensure that they have sustainable practices to not only maintain their own relevance in this new work order, but also to attract the talent that now demands this level of flexibility and I guess understanding and acceptance that their lives are not around work, and in work and life has to really work around each other. I think before I finish off, I think there's a real impact on the types of careers that people should expect for themselves out of all of these technological trends, but also cultural trends towards trusting their staff to do work as adults, as really responsible people. You don't need to have the paternalistic industrial mindset of I have to have a warm body and a seat. You have to be there from this hour to this hour for me to believe that you're adding value. You know, I need to see you. Now we're looking at value-added jobs. So there are broader opportunities in terms of how people can shape their careers, because now they're less defined, because all those defined, any job that can be so defined so beautifully will be automated. That's just a given. If you can define the type of work that you do day to day in a succinct job spec that okay, this is what I'm going to spend the day doing, that's going to be automated if not already. So that's not going to be a job in the future. So the fluidity actually is going to be a certainty in a lot of careers that people face. You're no longer going to be an accountant, an architect. You are going to have to constantly define your own value. You have to constantly package your own value to the people that you work for, and vice versa. The companies have to really define the value that they expect out of you, as well as what they bring to that relationship. And so there's a lot of, it's exciting for especially young people. It might be daunting for I guess, older generations who are very, I guess, certain about their futures and really holding on to the certainty of their careers and their pensions. That's just not a reality anymore. And so for young people, is really embracing the fluidity and really taking to heart all of the skills that you've listed out. Those are really critical, not just the technological skills, but really the soft skills of your integrity, of doing what you say you're going to do, of really being able to communicate the value that you bring, and being able to identify trends in a really creative way that really machines can't really take over yet, but AI will be there soon enough. Last but not least, I really want to touch on digital security. So as Suraf mentioned, which is completely accurate, as more and more processes are moved onto the cloud, digital security, cybersecurity is of paramount concern. However, just to add a bit of a broader context to that, because of how work will be more distributed, where before you have firewalls, you have protocols, all the hardware is in one place, you have only one, internet access, one form of internet access, is very easy to define where all the security parameters should be. And it's easy to say, okay, well, you can't bring your work computer home. All work has to be done in the office. However, now you pretty much can work on any device. You can be on your phone, you can on your laptop, your tablet. If you have 1,000 staff on your team, they could all be on different internet providers with different IP addresses, with all the different issues that come with that. And so now you really need zero trust policy when it comes to your security protocols that you have in place. It's no longer enough to have a moat strategy. And so really inculcating digital hygiene, secure digital hygiene in every single individual, for them to understand that they really need to be the people to add the barriers between work and personal life. You can't use the same password used for Facebook. You shouldn't really have the same apps on the phone that you're using for, Instagram or TikTok as you would for something that has high security clearance for. And my biggest bugbear, try to avoid using the same WhatsApp phone number for work and email address for work and all your online shopping. I think especially email for work and online shopping, that is really a huge, it might seem flippant, it might seem really arbitrary, but really that is, you are the weak link in your organization. As soon as business owners understand that, then they really need to invest more in their digital security strategy beyond just having a firewall set up, beyond just having people have two-factor authentication. There's a lot more to it. And so I think those are just my thoughts. But I think Suraf's done an amazing job at really capturing the really core elements of where we all should be expecting to go and what we need to prepare to really flourish in that environment.
Thank you very much, Amy, for those insightful remarks. I must confess to having mixed feelings when I listen to this conversation. So on the one hand, I feel the excitement at this whole new world, which has been accelerated by the pandemic. And I can imagine the huge advances in productivity and collaboration and efficiency. On the other hand, I cannot help but feel that a lot of people in the world will view this with great anxiety because they are at the risk of being left out. The kind of skills that you mentioned, Suraf, that list of very important skills to prosper and thrive in this new world, so to speak, a lot of people in the world don't have. I mean, if you are a hotel worker in Bali, even a hotel worker in Brunei, if you're in the business of, if you're a chambermaid, a housekeeper, in the huge hotel industry in this part of the world, in the Philippines, I mean, where do you stand in this new world? I sit on the board of a company in the Philippines providing low-cost, high-quality education to children from low-income groups. For children, working remotely in a one-room house, which you share with 6 other members of your family, is not a great option. In fact, going to school was a way to get out of the congestion. So in the course of this conversation, I'd like to explore not just the fantastic opportunities that digital transformation brings to us, but I think, explore some of the challenges which come from the less privileged part of the world. But maybe we can get back to that after we've taken a few questions. Andrew, questions?
Yes. So thank you, Saurav, and thank you, Amy, for the presentations and the viewpoints. I have 3 questions here. And there are more questions in the Q&A chat, but I'll go with what I have here sent to us earlier. There's a question here from Hafiz, which relates to talent and talent development. There's a question from Chris in terms of millennials in the workplace, which is another demographic. Amy mentioned about women. This millennials are another demographic. And the third question is about preparing for the future that we are describing here today. And that's a question from Anne. So let's begin with a question from Hafiz. So this is the question. The question from Hafiz is, how can we support the current talent we have today in our workplaces if at least 30% of the current roles will not exist, say 1-2 years into the future? First question. Second question from Chris with regards to millennials. We have increasing number of millennials and even Gen Z at work here today, who are what we call technological natives. Basically, these are guys and girls who were born in the era of Facebook. They don't know the time when the internet did not exist. And therefore, these folks are adapt skills faster than people like me, for example. So what is the impact to that on the workplace, particularly in terms of the small business who hires significantly more millennials? Third question is from Anne. So as a small business, how does a small, short of just being passive and waiting for these changes to impact the small business, how can a small business take a more proactive stance and actually prepare for this future that we are describing? So there you go, first 3. Do
you want to go first, Saurav, or?
So I would propose that I would direct the questions, and we don't have, so that we can have more time for more questions. So instead of everyone answering every question, we would just, so I propose that the first question to Saurav, the second question, Chris's question to Amy, and the third question, maybe both of you can contribute to it. So the first question again, Andrew.
Yes, that relates to talent. So how can we support the current talent or our employees today if we know that in a year from now, 2 years from now, 30% of their skills will no longer exist or will have to change drastically?
Yeah. So of course, one of the things that companies have to do, irrespective of the size, of course, with bigger companies, they have more leeway, they have more, let's say, financial resources, they have more workforce resources to take care of such things. But for this smaller and mid-sized companies, the first thing they have to do is figure out what is it that the company needs in the next 2 years in terms of technological advancements, in terms of capabilities, both from a data and digital perspective? Where does the company see itself going in the next 2-3 years? What are the skill sets? What are the, let's say, infrastructure upgrades it needs? And then you try to do a mapping of the current skill sets that you have in the company. And that's quite easy to do now. There are so many tools out there that are actually able to sniff through the profiles of the employees and figure out, okay, for example, you have so many employees that have some AI skills. You have so many employees that have, let's say, analytical skills. So the idea there will be, once you have done a mapping between what you need in the next 2 years to what you have today, then you look at your data literacy and digital literacy programs. Now, data literacy and digital literacy programs are something that you can always do in-house. You don't really have to invest a lot of resources, financial or otherwise, into ensuring that your workforce comes up to speed with these skill sets. There are so many tools, there are so many platforms out there. Even on YouTube, on Google, you can get a lot of resources that can help you come up to speed with these skill sets that you need your employees to come up to. The only thing is, make sure it's there in their talent development plan. So that of course, it's management by trust, of course, but then at the end of the day, the employees also need to show in their objectives that that they're actually doing this program, or they're kind of participating in this upskilling or reskilling work. So in the end, what happens is you're able to have a learning path for your employees that will actually enable them to achieve the objective that you have set for the organization as a whole. So I think their data literacy and digital literacy definitely will play a key role in the next 2-3 years. Yeah.
Thank you, Amy, on millennials.
On millennials, and can I just have a quick repeat of the question, Andrew, because I just want to make sure that I've got the question.
Andrew?
Yes. So the question is, what is your opinion on the increasing number of millennials in the workplace and how they affect or impact the way things are done?
I think so. There will obviously be more millennials as time goes on going into the workplace, because someone has to replace the old generation who are retiring. They will be asking for different things. They will be asking for more things that will help them live their lives better than the previous generations have been willing to put up with. I think there's a real divide. I would say generational divide in terms of your understanding of that relationship between employee and employer. I think younger people are now thinking, okay, well, I'm willing to give up a bit of my salary if it means that I won't be penalized for taking a day to take my son to hospital, for example. Or if I know of companies to try and attract millennial and Gen Z employees, give 1-year paid sabbatical, for example, because they understand that personal growth is as important for this workforce and as their paychecks. And so they allow for things like that. So employers have to see each employee as a whole person and not just the tasks that they do at work. They have to know that they have families and other obligations, because the new generation are demanding this. They are picking and choosing, for those who have the luxury to do so, picking the companies that are mindful of this and providing the opportunities for their growth. The reason why isn't because they're entitled or they feel like, oh, well, I deserve this, but they have a better understanding of what life is now. They cannot depend on this one employer for a lifetime of work. They know that if they do not budget in time to learn, to grow, they won't be as valuable further down the line in their career, because they know their career is not going to be 30 years, 40 years with the same employer. Their paycheck's not going to be exactly the same. They know that that job that they're doing today might not exist tomorrow. So this employer better have credits within an online learning platform that allows me to actually expand my skills. They also understand, looking back from their parents in the previous generation, they were working our entire lives, 8-hour, 10-hour days for those who are in the upper middle class, barely seeing their children, and only retiring at 60, 70 with barely anything to show for it. they realize that time is actually far more valuable as a human being than that potential pension that our parents worked their lives thinking, well, as long as I can sacrifice now, I'll sacrifice today, and this time I should have been spending with my family, because I know in the future we will have that security and I can give them more then. And realizing after the financial crises that we've been facing for the past couple of decades, that isn't a reality, that's not true. And so you have people realizing now and really teaching their children, you know what, or their children seeing their parents, it's not a price worth paying. And so they're going to be demanding more from the employers. And those are the things that I think move on to the last question, which is about what can small businesses even do to prepare for digital transformation, and how, I guess, to retain and nurture the talent that they have to really work to get. Should I move on to that? Should I stop and let her start that question first?
Yeah.
No, please, Amir, you can go ahead.
Okay, all right. So I think really it's important for us to first distinguish, make a distinction between digital transformation, IR 4.0, 5.0, and the jobs that are going to go. So when businesses think about what they need to do to prepare for this onslaught of technology, it isn't this wave that's coming that's going to hit you in the face. A lot of that is already here. A lot of that actually is beneficial. A lot of that isn't going to so you mentioned that earlier. What about the chambermaids at hotels who are working low wage jobs? How can they prepare for this digital transformation? I can guarantee you 50 years from now, hotels will still need chambermaids. You will still need someone. So high net worth industries especially will actually need more high touch services and will always need more high touch services. There will always be a need for human interaction. There will be certain jobs that, no matter how amazing AI is, no matter how good the robots are to function in the real world to replace those jobs, won't be able to do people will be paying a premium to avoid that. And so those jobs won't go away. But for the businesses that employ those people, digital transformation is still important. The data is still important. Data analysis is still important.
So my question, just to just interject with a quick point.
Sure.
This is in response to your point. My question would be, I completely understand that chambermaids, waiters, waitresses, those jobs will still be needed. Will they be well paid? Will those be good quality jobs?
We don't know.
Or will they?
It depends on the country. There are countries where I worked in a cafe in Australia and got paid 17 Australian dollars an hour a long time ago, which probably isn't much now. That isn't something that actually will be dependent on the digital transformation.
Yeah.
The way we treat our workers is independent of what technologies we use. It's
so
really about policy and
I would at the back of my mind, as I'm processing this conversation, at the back of my mind, I think of the millions of people in the poorer countries of the world in these kind of jobs, and how this transformation will affect them.
Sure.
But sorry to interrupt. So on the question of how small businesses, and we're talking about small businesses in Brunei, how they can prepare for that future. Many of these businesses are in, cafes, restaurants, small retail outlets, in that category. So what advice have you got for them?
I was just to get onto that before you interjected there. So basically, those jobs are still going to be there. For their personal well-being and career, they are advised to really try and expand their skills to be able to take advantage of the opportunities of the digital transformation. However, these businesses, regardless of the fact that they will forever or for a long time still be dependent on service workers, it doesn't mean that they are not part of this digital transformation. Data that they collect in terms of the performance of their staff, the resource management that they have, and this applies to small businesses here in Brunei. It could be, look at Jingchu, they're getting their orders on an electronic device to speed up, the order processing and billing. It's not you know, just because you are a brick and mortar shop that's dependent on service labor does not mean that this trend isn't relevant to you, isn't going to affect you, and isn't an opportunity for you. And so I'll give you one example. I have a friend who, when he first moved to Seattle with his mother from Laos, they opened up a takeaway shop, and then they bought a takeaway shop from a Vietnamese restaurant, but they were Laotian. So they were trying to introduce Laotian food to the area. And so instead of just doing what anyone would normally do, this entrepreneurial spirit, he decided to go around and do a poll. So he did a study to collect data to see what type of foods from that menu would be the most popular, and for them to streamline the menu that they have and the resources they had, which was extremely limited. They basically lived with barely anything, to really make their restaurant as efficient as possible. And so when we talk about this revolution as the future of work, IR 4.0, 5.0, it isn't necessarily just about the tools. The tools help us do a lot of these things. And as Andrew mentioned, it's about the mindset that for Gen Z, for those young people looking to prepare for this, it's about preparing them with the appropriate training so that they understand that it's a mindset. It's not learning to code, it's knowing that they need to learn new things, to be comfortable with learning new things, of adapting their education, not just to what they were told this needs to apply to, but to other possible scenarios. And so anyone with an accounting degree shouldn't just be thinking, I'll forever be an accountant, but understand the transferable skills that you have received out of that education needs to be applicable to other things. And it's your job to know how to do that. So for small business in Brunei, it's about assessing what you want to achieve, what tools you need to get there, and then really investing in the infrastructure necessary to do that and the skills necessary for you to achieve that. It's all about business, just doing a proper business case study, for that transformation. And I think as more and more companies do that, they're realizing that the business case for preparing for digital transformation, for investing in it, is actually very, very high, or else they're going to fall back from their competitors.
Thank you very much. Suraf, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two things that, irrespective of the industry you're from, and especially for a small business, now we also need to understand that they have limited resources to spend on their employees, or to spend on hiring new people. Data and analytics, that's a key skill that everyone should have. That's because everyone needs to understand how to process data, what information to get out of it. But more importantly, when we look at the risks involved with any type of business today, is around the way you treat your customers' data. And especially when you're looking at even a small business, for example, if it's doing business with someone in the European Union and the GDPR rules come in, if any unscrupulous employee leaks the data or does not treat the data correctly, it can have huge implications on the small business. For big businesses, of course, the leeway to handle that risk is a lot more. But then for small businesses, it can be quite a challenging task. So I would believe any employee or any company that is looking to, harness the future capabilities of the future of work, let's say, has to have employees who are ethical, who have a lot of integrity, who understand how to treat customers' data. For example, if you go to a restaurant, the person who has access to a credit card or your debit card is not the manager sitting at the back of the office somewhere, but it's actually the waiter or the person who's serving you. And if that person has access to all the information, and if he takes a snapshot of all the information that you have on the credit card, it can have unpleasant surprises for you later on, right? So it's important that your employees have that integrity, that ethics, and that's something that you need to make sure when you're hiring them. So there are a lot of psychometric tests that can help you get some sense of where you stand. And of course, from a security and privacy perspective, irrespective of the size of the company you are, you really need to treat security and privacy very well. There are tools. I mean, as Amy said, it's because of the advances in cybersecurity, it's quite easy right now to put that let's say that boundary to make sure you are not breached so easily. So indeed, those investments have to be made. And in terms of skill sets, you really need to make sure your employees understand data and analytics pretty well. I'm not looking at AI, that's for the next step, but immediate step, your employees really need to understand data and analytics and what it can do for you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Andrew, can we have the last round of questions? If there are any.
Yes, we have about 5 minutes. Yeah, so let's go with the last round. So I have a number of questions here in the Q&A, and I'd like to acknowledge the question from Ambrose. Ambrose was asking about the types of skills that are becoming obsolete or becoming a dead end, and I think Amy and Surab, to some extent, responded to this question already. So if I could just provide a quick answer to Ambrose. These are jobs or skills that Amy says can be defined, and if these can be defined, these can be commoditized, and therefore the machines will take over. Machines or artificial intelligence, loosely used. But maybe Amy can add to that later on. I have a question from Raihan, two actually from Raihan, so I'd just like to put this forward anyway. That's all. Very quickly, Raihan is asking whether there is a sweet spot in terms of digitizing your businesses. Conversely put, is there a thing such as over digitizing the business, which makes it impractical or not impractical in terms of business? His other question is directed to Amy, but that's all. I'll put this to you anyway. Decide. With all the uncertainties during the pandemic, do you think that leaders need to have not a predefined response plan during a crisis or in terms of the future of work, but rather have a mindset that will prevent them from overreacting to a situation like the pandemic? So he's asking basically, is there a situation wherein business leaders would overreact to these pressures brought about by the pandemic in terms of adapting to the future of work? We have a comment here from Lavinia. This is a comment rather than a question. And Lavinia has a comment that states that I'll just read it out loud. I think the challenges about the move from conventional working methods to a more flexible one, such as working from home, is the mentality of the employers and reforming the existing policies and or handbook that the company has. So this has to do with human resource adjustments. And the last question is from John CJ. As a member of Generation Z, what advice could you give to our generation to avoid going into a job that would easily be wiped out by the evolving technology? I think this was also kind of alluded to earlier on, but those are the concluding questions that. So
I would suggest that maybe Amy would like to make a comment on, just an elaboration of the point you made earlier regarding skills being obsolete, if you want to add to that. The sweet spot question, the risk of over digitization, I put to Surav. And then business leaders, that's specifically for Amy. Business leaders overreacting. I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but if Amy understands, it's fine. Amy, you understand that question? Yeah, okay. So let's do it that way. Quick responses. Amy first, then Surav, then Amy again.
Sure. I think in terms of the skills, as we mentioned earlier, it's really about understanding that you are a toolbox. All the skills that you have as a toolbox, you need to be able to identify where they should be applied and what value they bring. And so for those who are concerned about the types of jobs that will be disappearing over the next few years, there will be jobs that disappear, but there'll be so many more that will come and replace them. There are jobs today that we would have never imagined were actually real, and someone would pay for that 2 years ago. And so I would definitely hesitate to encourage any fear when it comes to encountering this, because as Saurav mentioned, the resources available to build up this toolbox that you have, to build up this cache of skills to apply to any situation is actually more accessible now than ever before, freer now than ever before, more democratized now than ever before. There's a lot of free resources out there for you to build. So I'll give you an example. I challenged myself this year to do 1 online course a month. I'm on my 3rd one now. And so, and I didn't pay for any of it. I'm auditing most of them. If I feel that it's worthwhile, I'll pay to get this certification, but that's not where I see the value. The value is in the knowledge that I get. And I have a child who needs to be on me 24/7. If I can do that, anyone can do that. And so, and I do it on my phone that's broken. So if I could do that, again, everyone can do that. So it's about understanding the mentality that you need to have about transferable skills, hard skills that are extremely useful. For example, knowing how to use a computer, knowing how to connect to the internet, knowing how to use some of these online tools. Those are hard skills that you can train for online for free. So maybe just a short one on that, but anyone who has any further questions on how to do that, resources to access, more than welcome to contact me. There's so many available. Check out DARE's IBA. I think they're paying for you to do those courses, which is unbelievable. So you do them. Should I just jump straight to the last questions, or should I pass it over to Saurav?
Maybe we'll pass it over to Saurav and then we'll come back to you. Yeah. Saurav?
Yeah, thanks, Henry. Thanks, Sata. So indeed, in terms of the sweet spot, it all depends on what you're looking to do. Every company has their own set of parameters. Every company has their own objectives that they need to make. The biggest risk here is a lot of companies, and especially the smaller, the medium companies, they kind of try to be a follower of digital transformation. They always see what's happening with other companies and can we do this? So you want to digitize or you want to digitalize just for the sake of it. And the risk there is you don't do a state of art. You don't do a kind of risk analysis to understand first, what is it that we really need to digitize? What are the processes that we need to automate, or what are the processes that we need to increase the efficiency of? And so the first thing would be to do a kind of sanity check, to do a risk analysis, to do a state-of-the-art analysis on where we are today and where we want to be. And once you have these 2 benchmarks identified, then you figure out, okay, what are the steps, what are the digital initiatives, efforts we need to take to reach there? Without doing this analysis, and if you start digitalizing just for the sake of it, the process will never end, because there will always be something new coming over. And that's not going to be something that's sustainable for a small or medium-sized company. For a large company, of course, the board will come back to the CEO later on and say, why are you investing on some things that we really don't need? So it's important that you do these 2 benchmarking levels first. You create those benchmarks, where you are today, where you want to be in. And of course, it has to be a smart move. You need to understand in how much time do you want to be there, and what are the efforts you need in terms of infrastructure, in terms of talent, or in terms of any other efforts that you need to make, and then you go ahead. So if you do these 2 things, you really don't need a sweet spot, because the entire journey will be sweet in that aspect. So I think, yeah, you need to have these 2 benchmarks leveled out first. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Amy.
All right, so the question from Raihan, I think it's really easy for you to I guess, veer towards or veer away from predefined responses after seeing how some countries have fared badly or some have fared well following the pandemic. But I think it's really necessary to have plans. The countries that have done well, like Brunei, actually did well when it came to pandemic planning. The UK did not, and did not improve their plans when they were assessed in 2011, and they have one of the highest death rates in the world. And so, and this is really important, not just because we will, I guarantee you, see more pandemics, and this isn't a prayer, this is actually probabilities. It's all about probabilities. And in assessing the probability of something happening, is doing the risk assessments for each of those scenarios, and preparing for the worst case scenarios in those situations is how you do well in the future. And don't forget, we're also facing a climate crisis that is happening as we speak. We're not mitigating against that. We're also not really preparing very well for it either. And so this isn't just heads of government. This isn't just governments that need to think about it. It's businesses who are looking to be resilient in these situations. That will happen. The likelihood is extremely high. And so you need to start preparing for example, resilience planning for another pandemic. It might have different features to the pandemic that might be very different from COVID, but will be just as debilitating. Climate crisis, what will happen when your supply chains completely disrupted because you know, there's an environmental disaster somewhere around the world. Maybe the source of your agricultural goods is no longer available because it's been wiped out. Those are things you should plan for, and having the digital tools to not only plan and prepare for them, but really to mitigate the risks is really important. So this is where understanding what opportunities available in digital transformation is really important when you're doing a lot of these assessments, because then if you were thinking, if there is anything to happen, if there was an earthquake and we couldn't get to our staff, how can we use the technology right now to make sure our business keep going? And then this is one of the things that the Brunei government really insisted that companies do, the resilience planning for all businesses of all sizes, because as we've seen in some countries where they haven't done a good job of that, they were really suffering. Food and beverage businesses in the UK that before would have never considered deliveries suddenly had to consider deliveries and wasted a lot of money having to invest in things that they probably should have had in the first place. So those are just my points. I don't think a predefined response plan is bad, but having the behavior and mindset to go with it, to be able to adapt, and a really sound understanding of all the tools in your disposal is really important as well.
That's great. We have now reached the end of our 1 hour. In fact, we have used up a little bit more than an hour. I wanted to just close off this conversation by posing each of you a question. And the question is, if you had one piece of advice to give a young person finishing school now, thinking of the future, if they are in that privileged part of the world, contemplating what to study in university, if they are not in that privileged part of the world, contemplating what job to prepare for, what would your advice be, given these changes that are accelerating before our eyes? So maybe we'll start with you, Amy, and finish with Suraf.
Sure. I think the one tip, do a SWOT analysis on yourself. Really analyze all the strengths that you have, and you'd be surprised the resources that you have at your disposal that you've never really considered before. It's not just your degree. It's not just the qualifications you have. It's your ability to turn up on time. It's your ability to be comfortable in speaking in a public setting. It's your confidence in traveling to a new country without ever having been there before by yourself. Those are actually strengths that not everyone has. So all those things that you need to map out, and understanding the weaknesses that you can counter and build on using all the researchers we've discussed, but more importantly, to broaden your understanding of what your career is, of who you are as a person. You are not defined by the degree you took and then the job that you hope to get, and broaden the range of opportunities that you're looking for. Remote working means that you can apply for jobs outside of Brunei. I've done it many times before. Many people have done it many times before. There are no limits to where you can apply. As long as it's open to anybody, you apply. It might mean that you have to compete with a bigger pool of talent, but then the opportunities are there and bigger. And so it means resilience through that process, and not really waiting and depending and waiting for an opportunity to fall on your lap here locally.
Thank you very much. Suraf.
Yeah, I think irrespective of where you are or the economic setting you come from, nothing should deter you from learning. And the key here is you need to have a mindset for continuous learning. Why? Because what you're learning today will, in all probability, get obsolete in a few years' time. And then you really have to restart the process. So rather than doing that, keep updating yourselves, keep looking at what's going on in the industry or in the world in terms of technology, in terms of ways of working. Try to upgrade yourself, try to update yourself with all these new information, new knowledge as they come by. And that's the key, continuous learning, because you as Amy said, you'll always have a bigger pool of competition to look at, and to stay ahead of that curve, it's important that you continuously upskill yourselves, make sure what is relevant is with you in the shortest possible time, even before the rest of the competition gets to it. So it's important to work fast in terms of your skills upgrade, but work more smartly. So continuous learning would be key. Yeah.
So Amy and Suraf, thank you very much for taking the time to join this conversation. Thank you very much for your insights, and thank you for your inspiring closing remarks. And for the rest of the people there are about 50 at one time in the room. Thank you 55. All for joining this first of Asia Inc. Forum's webinars in the Ask Me Anything series. It's the future of work today. Next week, it's about managing risk. Thank you all, and thank you, Andrew, for putting this all together. Thank you. Enjoy the rest.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of the day and the weekend ahead.
Thank you, Dato. I just also like to just quickly add our thanks to our sponsors, Baiduri Bank, Archipelago Group, and CAC Environmental Services for their support. And thank you to the panel, Surav and Amy. And lastly, come back next week, Thursday, same time, same place, for, as Dato mentioned, our Ask Me Anything series on the biggest risks in an uncertain future and how to manage them. So we'll see you again next week. Enjoy the rest of your day and weekend ahead. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.